Well, welcome back to the Southern Valley Conference Room. Good to see everybody back again. Continuing our study in Isaiah chapter 39 today. Last session, chapter 38, we looked at King Hezekiah, where God come and said, get your stuff in order. You are a dead man. But through his prayer, God extended him for 15 more years. So that was last chapter. And we pick right up in that same flow of our historic section. We are reading again from the Passion Translation today. So verse 1, chapter 39. It says, shortly after Hezekiah was healed of his illness, the king of Babylon, Merodach-Baladan. How'd you like to have that, Mo Nicker? Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, heard that King Hezekiah had been deathly ill and had recovered. So he sent envoys carrying letters and a lavish gift. Delighted by the king's gesture and having a desire to impress them, Hezekiah welcomed the envoys from Babylon and opened the doors of the king's storehouses of treasures and showed them to the envoys. He let them see all of his gold, silver, spices, and costly fragrant oils, as well as his entire armory. All of the king's royal treasures, all that was in the king's palace, and all the wealth of his whole kingdom was shown to them. That didn't sound real smart to me when I read it for the first time. How about y'all? Now remember, last session we talked about that extra added 15 years. What's he going to do with these 15 years? We talked about, his son who followed him as king was a terrible king. And as a result of that, judgment came, captivity came to the nation of Judah. But that's not all that goes south. So really, this is a picture and a part of we talked about last time, when God says something, sometimes it's better, most of the time, all the time, it's better just to go with what God says. So Hezekiah is not moving in the right direction. He's not going to finish well. Now, he doesn't go as wrong as he could possibly have gone, but this is not a wise move. And as we'll see in the remainder of this chapter, there's some prophecy that really transitions us into the rest of Isaiah. The first part of Isaiah has everything to do with Assyria. After this, now we're going to start looking at Babylon. So here's the introduction of Babylon coming into our story, our picture. Let me read a little from our commentator here. Says this Merodach-Baladan. His presence showed this was more than a courtesy call. This was an attempt to bring the kingdom of Judah onto the side of the Babylonians against the Assyrians. So the commentator brings in this whole dialogue. Remember, we're in the same area, same region of the world. Assyria is a problem not just for Jerusalem, for Israel and Judah, but Assyria is a problem for Babylon as well. Babylon is not the world power yet that it will become. Assyria is kind of the bully at the moment. So this is the king of Babylon trying to make some allegiances with Judah to bolster and strengthen its ability to resist Assyria. That makes sense. So there's this agreement they're trying to reach coming in here. To the Assyrians, Merodach-Baladan was a terrorist. To himself, he was a freedom fighter with his life devoted to the liberation of his beloved Babylon from Assyrian tyranny. The footnote here in mine, the name Merodach-Baladan means God of blood and slaughter. Mars, war, murder. So that's a great name to walk around with, right? God of blood and slaughter. So to the Assyrians, he was a terrorist. So again, Assyria is already exerting their dominance, but here's a guy who's trying to withstand as much as he can the onslaught of Assyria. Really a problem, a terrorist for the Assyrians. Now, we are somewhat familiar with terrorists in our modern day society, right? What do terrorists do? They're not overtly strong, but they just pop up and cause problems where they can. And that's what we are going to see out of this man at this time. He's a terrorist. He's a thorn in the side of the Assyrians, but here he is now coming to King Hezekiah. The scripture indicates he's heard. So, word spreads that King Hezekiah was deathly ill. He was going to die. He was sick to the point of death, but he has recovered. So this king kind of sees an opportunity to maybe make a little allegiance. It wasn't just a courtesy call. He's trying to come in and make alliance with him. Hezekiah was deeply worried about Assyria. Feeling honored by the embassy, he gladly welcomed the envoys of this arch enemy of Assyria. Without consulting either the Lord or Isaiah, he showed them his vast treasures, his abundant supplies of food, and his military armaments. God had given Hezekiah great wealth, so the visitors were duly impressed. So again, this is just not smart, just not a wise move. But he was impressed. Now, commentators are going to talk about this. We'll talk about this in just a minute. But when we start being concerned with impressing other people, we're moving in the wrong direction. Especially when I've got God who's already proven to me, hopefully should have proven to me, stop trusting in other nations as your means of comfort, as your means of strength. They were looking to Egypt, trying to make allegiances in alignment with Egypt against Assyria. God told them over and over not to do that. And even in the last couple of chapters, we've seen where Egypt just kind of went away. Assyria's the problem, but God has demonstrated through prophecy. He has healed Hezekiah. He's given him the sign of the sundial backing up. All of this is proof and evidence and signs. I'm with you. I'm for you. Assyria's not going to step foot in to the city of Jerusalem. Yes, it's taken the nation, but it will not take Jerusalem. Not an arrow's going to be shot. They will not come into this city. So God's already established that, but we see Hezekiah kind of moving back in the same direction. And isn't that something that we all struggle with? We got patterns. Anybody ever notice patterns in your life? When certain things happen, maybe God comes through and you kind of over that hump, but the next time something arises, we see these negative mindsets and these patterns, and it's so easy to fall back into. That's what's going on here with Hezekiah. Egypt wouldn't have helped to me, but Babylon can be. Babylon is an up-and-coming power on the scene. If I make allegiance and alignment with Babylon, that'll secure my position. That'll have me in a better place to defend against Assyria. So this same mindset's at work. And isn't that just like the enemy to come when I'm already susceptible? He knows. Why? Because he's the one planting those thoughts in my head to begin with. So he moves through this allegiance with Babylon coming in, and Hezekiah just falls into the trap. He just goes for it, hook, line, and sinker, opens up the doors and shows these guys everything. Does that ever make sense? I mean, in what world is this a good idea? Here is a up-and-coming power on the scene, and I'm just going to spread the doors wide open. I'm going to show you everything. In the King James Version, it literally says there was nothing that he did not show them. I mean, so he literally allowed the emissaries from Babylon to see everything they possessed, all their wealth, all their ability to defend themselves, all their food stores, everything they had was opened up, and he allowed them access to see. We can see right off the bat, this isn't going to be a good idea. Y'all with me? Let me read this too. The first part of Isaiah, chapters 1 through 38, mainly dealt with the present threat of the Assyrian Empire. The rest of Isaiah, chapter 39 through 66, will prophetically speak to the threat of the coming Babylonian Empire. Therefore, this brief chapter is actually an introduction to the second half of Isaiah. We said that earlier. So let's look at verse 2 here. Delighted by the king's gesture and having a desire to impress them. There's a desire to impress. Do we have that? Do you struggle with a desire to impress? I think that's something that most people, if they're honest, at some level, we want people to like us, right? I want to be liked. I did a recent Mitch's Morning Musing that says, take the I want you to like me sticker off your forehead and put it on the mirror where it belongs, if y'all saw that one. Because I think most of us walk around with this I want you to like me sticker on our forehead. King Hezekiah is no different. So regardless, and it's something else I think is worth mentioning here, regardless of what level of success or prestige people reach, they still got the same issues, right? You know, from our perspective, looking at it, I mean, this is the king of Judah, man. He's got it made. He's living the life. He's where I want to be. But he's got the same insecurities that we struggle with. He's got the same issues that we struggle with. So although he's king, he has this strong desire to impress this envoy. So as they come in, he just opens the doors wide and shows them everything. Verse 3. So after all this is over, Isaiah the prophet visited the king and said to him, "What have you done? What did these men say, and where did they come from?" Hezekiah replied, "They are envoys from distant Babylon." So let me read a little bit here before we jump into verse 3.
From way over there.
Way over, yeah. I mean, a long, long way away. That, you know, they just visiting. But let me read a little bit of what this commentator has to say about this pleasing aspect. We can imagine that this was flattering for King Hezekiah. After all, Judah was a lowly nation with little power, and Babylon was a junior superpower. To receive this notice and recognition from the king of Babylon must have really made Hezekiah feel as if he was important. Isn't that what flattery does? You know, people come along, I mean, you don't really even know whether you can trust what they're saying. They're just trying to puff you up a little bit. That's what's happening. We can imagine Hezekiah wanting to please these envoys from Babylon and wanting to show them that they had good reason to be impressed with him and his kingdom. So he did everything he could to impress them, showed them the very best riches of their royal household, showed them everything. There was nothing that he didn't show them. As the coming rebuke from Isaiah will demonstrate, this was nothing but proud foolishness on Hezekiah's part. He is in the dangerous place of wanting to please and impress men, especially ungodly men. I thought that was a great perspective that the commentator brings in. We all have this desire, I believe, we got to fight against to want to impress others, but we've really got to be careful when the people we are seeking to impress are not godly people. Why? Because it is easier for me to fall into ways of thinking, speaking, and acting that are ungodly if I want to impress the ungodly. Does that make sense? I mean, it's one thing if I got a good, righteous, holy man that I'm trying to impress. I'm going to try to be more righteous than I really am, right? I'm going to try to act like I'm more spiritual than I really am. But if it's an ungodly man that I'm trying to impress, I'm probably going to lower my standards and my expectation. I will allow myself to do things that I shouldn't do as a means of impressing the ungodly. Have you seen that play out in your life? My mama used to tell me this: you lay down with dogs, you're going to get fleas. You ever heard that little saying? And it's true, man. The people that we associate with, those that we feel the desire to impress, we're going to either rise or lower to the level of those individuals that we are spending the most time with. These are ungodly men that Hezekiah wants to impress. So what is he going to do? He's going to be more prone to operate in ungodly ways to impress the ungodly. Have y'all seen that? just a little something I think worth thinking about as you think about who you trying to impress. You with me? Let me just read it. It was a genuine compliment for Hezekiah to receive this recognition from the king of Babylon. But Hezekiah received it wrongly and let it go to his head. It is easy to get too puffed up when people compliment or recognize us and to begin to take their praise and ourselves too seriously. Is that true? I mean, it feels good to be complimented, right? It feels good to be praised. But you got to be careful how you receive that. You can't start listening to your own, what's the word? Ego? There's a phrase. Your own news stuff. It's escaping me. Edit that out, whoever edits this. They're never edited, so you get what you get. In this place of wanting to please men, Hezekiah is no longer a true servant of God. Paul wrote in Galatians 1:10, "For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ." And isn't that true? I can't have it both ways. If I am seeking to please God, if that's what I'm truly aspiring for, is to please Him, then I'm not going to please men. But if my desire is for people to be pleased with me, for me to please people, who gets put on the shelf? God does. When we live to please men, we cannot at the same time live to please and serve God. When we live to please men, we are really living to serve ourselves, because what we value from men is the praise and honor and recognition that they may give us. It is a glorious thing to live to serve men, but not to live to please them. Commentator also brought in Samson. Just as Samson revealed his strength to the whore, his word, so Hezekiah reveals God's glory to the devils as though he were their companion and had received favor from Babylon. So I thought it was interesting bringing Samson in. It's exactly the same thing that happened, right? And you look at Samson's story. I mean, how many times do you have to understand? 3 times she's begging him to give me the secret to your strength. He tells her a lie the first time, and she goes, spreads the lie, and they come in and try it, and it don't work. Tells her a lie the second time, she goes, spreads the lie, they come in and try to take him, and it don't work. After 2 times, you think the man would have enough sense to recognize what's going on. But what's working here? It's this inferiority, this need to please, this need to be accepted, this need to be wanted that eventually wears him down, not a godly but an ungodly individual, and he opens the door, tells the secret, and we know what happens. They come in, shave his head, gouge his eyes out, and he winds up grinding meal, right? That Samson, same spiritual dynamic at work here with King Hezekiah. So don't think Samson and Hezekiah are anomalies, guys. We all need to pay attention. Take our thoughts captive. Discern the source of those thoughts as we battle these same kind of thoughts and feelings. You with me? All right, I think that's enough. So we are in verse 3. So what have you done? What these men say, where'd they come from? Much like God, much like parents, I think this is a question Isaiah already knows the answer to, right? So when God asked Adam, for example, where are you? God knew where Adam was. That was not a question for God's information. It was a question for Adam's information. I believe it's the same type question here. Isaiah already knows what's transpiring, and he's giving Hezekiah an opportunity to own up and take responsibility, maybe to think a little more deeply about what he has done. But notice how Hezekiah responded. They are envoys from distant Egypt. Verse 4. Then Isaiah asked, what did they see in your palace? They have seen everything in my palace, responded Hezekiah. I showed them everything in my royal treasuries. So we see, but he's oblivious. I mean, literally, it's like, even though the man's asking him the question, I believe for the purpose of him doing a little more examination, It's almost like he's proud of it. He's like, Hezekiah is like Isaiah. Man, I showed them everything. They are so impressed with us. I mean, I'm just a little nobody in my eyes. This is a growing superpower, and they are some kind of pumped about who we are. They're impressed with us. I showed them everything we had. So there's not even at this point a awareness that he's done anything wrong, that this was stupid. I mean, he seems to be proud of what he has done and what he has said. Again, it don't get a whole lot better. Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Here is what Yahweh, commander of angel armies, has to say to you." Here's what God says. "The days are coming when all the treasures in your palace and all the wealth that your ancestors have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Absolutely nothing will be left, says the Lord." All right, let's stop there. There's more, but let's stop there for a moment. The days are coming. Commentator lets us know it's going to be 100 years before it happens. But the days are coming when all the treasures in your palace, all the wealth that your ancestors have stored. So it's not enough that they're going to come take what you got, your inheritance. Everything that has been stored, everything that's been laid up, everything that has been accomplished up to this point in our history, it's all going to be carried off to Babylon. Absolutely nothing will be left. Now, what kind of word is that? If you're Hezekiah, remember, he has just been given 15 extra years. And now the first major decision that we see following that, what's the result? God says, "You blew it, big boy." Now here's my thought, and I don't know where to go with this, but here's my thought. Had Hezekiah not done this, is it possible that Babylon would not have eventually took Judah and Jerusalem? I don't know. I can't answer that. But is this possibly the first domino that begins to fall that will eventually lead to Babylon's coming and taking over Jerusalem? I don't know, just something to think about. But it definitely was a thought that popped in my head. So everything that you have, everything that our ancestors have stored is going to be taken. Verse 7. "Some of your sons who come after you will be deported, be castrated, and become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." So not only are they going to take all the stuff, your sons, your offspring, your prodigy, they're going to take them to Babylon. They're going to castrate them. They're going to make them eunuchs in the king's palace in Babylon. Does that remind you of anybody? So here's what the commentator says. Back to all your house will be taken. Hezekiah thought that this display of wealth would impress the Babylonians. All it did was show them what the kings of Judah had and what they could get from them. One day the kings of Babylon would come and take it all away. This was fulfilled in 2 Kings 24 and 2 Kings 25. So if you wanted to take a little time to go read when it does happen, that's 2 Kings 24 and 25. Under the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. It would be more than 100 years before Babylon carried away the royal treasures of Judah, but they did come, just as Isaiah prophesied. This prophecy is so remarkably accurate that many skeptics insist, without grounds other than unbelief, a later Isaiah must have written it after the fact. So this is one of those people who don't believe in Scripture clamp on this. There's no way that Isaiah could have prophesied this far in advance to this, this detail. So, the eunuchs. One fulfillment of this was the taking of Daniel and his companions into captivity. Daniel was one of the king's descendants taken into the palace of the king of Babylon. So we've got the story of Daniel. Y'all remember Daniel in Babylon. There's so much we could get into there, but you see in the fulfillment. Nowhere in Daniel does it say that Daniel was a eunuch, that he was castrated and made a eunuch, but many people believe that he was as a result of this prophecy that Isaiah gives to Hezekiah in regards to what would happen. I've always heard that, but never really made that connection, to be honest with you, until I was doing this study for the commentary. So Daniel was a eunuch. I've heard that all my life. I was taught that. But why? Here's the answer. Here's what happened. Because you've done this, Hezekiah, your descendants. Daniel was one of the descendants of Hezekiah. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which is their Babylonian names. I don't remember their Hebrew names. Anybody else remember?
Azariah, Hananiah, and...
Come on.
Malachi.
Come on, Bible scholar. I'm impressed.
Hananiah, Azariah, and...
George. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was a descendant of. So it would not have been an immediate son, but he was a descendant of.
It says earlier that his son, didn't it say his sons would be carried off into captivity?
And that son means descendants, not your literal. So, not good news. Would you agree? Not good news. What have you done? Who are these men? They're from Babylon, this far off, distant Babylon. I've showed them everything. Not a good move. Because you have done this, the day is coming when Babylon's going to come. They're going to take everything we have. They're going to take our offspring, your offspring, into captivity, castrate them, make them eunuchs. They're going to be servants in the king's palace. How would you respond to such a word? Now, we just saw Hezekiah when it was his life. I'm going to die. Get your house in order. What did he do? He turned over, put his face to the wall, wept bitterly, and prayed, and God gave him 15 extra years. So when it's his life on the line, he's calling out to God. Look at how Hezekiah responds to this prophetic statement. Then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, the word Yahweh has spoken through you is good and right. For he thought, at least for me, there will be peace and security in my lifetime. Did you hear that? That's good news. I ain't got 15 more years. I know that. And it's just going to be, a long time down the road. That ain't going to happen in my day. I ain't got nothing to worry about. I'm going to live out my days in peace. That's a good thing. Huh? I don't care about Levi, Micah, and Garrett. I don't care about my offspring. I don't care about what's going to happen to my kids. I am so self-focused, which is where this whole need to impress comes from. That makes sense. You see this? It's all about me. I'm going to impress these Babylonians. They're going to think I'm something. You've just sold the entire nation and your children into slavery. And how do you respond? It's good news. That's good news. Ain't got nothing to worry about. I'll be dead and gone a long time before it happens. Y'all handle it. Huh? Now, we sit here and shake our head like, my God, there's something wrong with that fellow. But how many times have I operated the same way? I'm like, I know this probably ain't good, and the choices I'm making is long term probably not going to be for the best, but it ain't going to be nothing I got to worry about. Somebody else can handle it. Just be real. This is Mitch. God talks to me this way. I was riding down the road the other day, and a little piece of something, I don't know, I rolled down the window and flipped it out the window. And my Garrett says, Daddy, what are you doing? What are you talking about? That's littering. You're destroying the planet. I'm like, where are you getting this mess? I mean, they're teaching it down there, but I'm like, that was that encounter. But a few days later, I was riding down the road and kind of rolled down the window. I'm like, whoa, God spoke. Is that all right? I mean, God's like, wait a minute, why? Why are you throwing that out? Do you not care anymore about the planet? Do you not care anymore about, it's litter on the side of the road. Somebody's going to have to pick that up. All you got to do is stick it in your cup, and when you get to the house, throw it in the trash can. How many times have I been so self-centered, self-focused, only thinking about me, that my choices and my decisions, how that's going to impact future generations, has no impact whatsoever on my choices and decisions? See, I caught you, didn't I? Now, I'm not a Hezekiah. By God, if that was the way God spoke to me, I know I would have responded differently, really. How do we respond to the choices and decisions we're making today when we already know what kind of impact that's going to have down the road? That's just my thoughts for you today. Let me read a little bit more from the commentator. We'll be done. There's no doubt that Hezekiah started out as a godly king, and overall his reign was one of outstanding godliness. Yet his beginning was much better than his end. Hezekiah did not finish well. God gave Hezekiah the gift of 15 more years of life, but the added years did not make him a better or more godly man. Now listen to this last section. It's so good. Time or age doesn't necessarily make us any better. I'll be 50 in January next year. I've often thought by the time I'm 50, I'd be a little more, I just somehow time, right? By the time I hit 50, I'm going to have things a little more figured out than you know what I've realized? If I hadn't done some work and really put in the effort, I ain't got nothing no more figured out today than I did when I was 15 years old. Time doesn't change anything. Consider that time does nothing but pass away. We sometimes say time will tell, time will heal, or time will bring out the potential in me, but time will do nothing of the sort. Time will only come and go. It is how we use time that matters. Hezekiah didn't make good use of the extra time the Lord gave him. It's how we use the time that matters. Now, we asked the question last week, how would you like to know you had 15 years left? How would you like to know when that day was that's going to be your last day on the planet? Would that change what you do with the time? How you use the time that you know you have remaining? I think all of us sitting at the table will say, well, yeah. But would it? Would it? Because everybody sitting here knows we have limited amount of time, period, right? I don't know how limited it is, but I know I've only got a few years left. I had a friend, I'm not going to call his name. He's 61, I believe he said. And has never done this up till this last year, but he literally has planned out his life. These bucket list things, if you want to say bucket list, these are things I want to accomplish in life. Every day, he looks at that list, makes adjustments to that list. He's writing his funeral, if you will. He wants to make sure that he's using the whatever remainder of time he has left, he's using it in a way that it's most beneficial to what he feels God has for him in the days that he has left. Finishing well is a high priority. How about us? What am I doing with the time? How am I using the time? God speaks to me through Facebook. He does. And I use Facebook. Hopefully God speaks to people through Facebook, through me. But I read this little quote the other day. Daddy, you will be remembered for how you use the time between 6 and 8 o'clock every evening. Boy, that hit me. Because it's right. I mean, my boys don't see me from morning till evening. It's that time from 6 to 8 o'clock every evening that I have to engage and impact their lives. That's the time. Can I just be real with you? That ain't my best time. By 6 o'clock in the evening, I just want them to shut up and sit down. Leave me alone. Let me, I've been up since 4:30. I've been going all day. I need a minute. Y'all just hush. I'm not using that time the way I need to use that time. I got all kind of reasons and excuses why that is, but the reality is that little quote on Facebook is right. It's those 2 hours between 6 and 8 o'clock. I got a 14-year-old kid. He does sit down and shut up. It's hard. It's the hardest thing I do to get any kind of conversation out of him. He don't want to be around Daddy no more. Not that he don't like me. It's just he's got his world. He's doing his thing. He don't want, Daddy ain't cool no more. I still got 2 that want my time, that want my attention. What am I going to do? How am I going to use it? Now, this is just what this is speaking to me. Maybe you are in different phases of life than I am, but the principle applies. Time's going to do nothing but pass away. It's just going to go on. What am I doing with it? How am I using the time that God has given me? That's my thoughts. So, Father, thank you for Isaiah. 8 little verses, but so much in here that can help shape how we view our life and our days ahead. Help us. Help us to finish well. Help us to use the time that we have remaining, whatever that time is. We're going to make some choices and decisions that have ramifications that aren't for good. That's just a reality. But God, help us limit those and grow exponentially the choices and decisions we can make to move things in the right direction. That's my prayer. Y'all agree? Amen. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank y'all.